An October morning in 1903 saw an unexpected crowd gather in Chicago for the Riverside Estate property auction. Among the curious buyers sifting through decades of accumulated treasures, antique dealer Sophia Martinez moved with practiced efficiency. Her keen eye quickly separated valuable items from mere clutter as she navigated the spacious Tudor-style mansion. The Williamson family had occupied the home for nearly a century before the last heir, elderly Margaret Williamson, passed away childless. Now strangers sifted through their personal effects, each item marked with a price that reduced a lifetime of memories to mere dollars and cents. In the mansion's wood-paneled library, Sophia discovered a collection of framed photographs arranged on an antique mahogany table. Most were typical family portraits spanning decades, graduation photos, wedding pictures, holiday gatherings. But one particular frame caught her eye, its ornate silver border tarnished with age. The photograph, clearly from the 1920s judging by the clothing and style, depicted a young couple posing in what appeared to be their living room. The man wore a three-piece suit with a pocket watch chain, his hair slicked back according to the era's fashion. The woman, dressed in a dropped-waist dress typical of the flapper period, sat gracefully beside him, a faint smile playing on her lips. Between them, cradled in the woman's arms, lay an infant, no more than 6 months old. The baby was clad in a long, delicate lace christening gown, the kind wealthy families commissioned for special occasions. At first glance, the portrait embodied the prosperity and happiness of the Roaring Twenties, a successful couple with their precious child posing in their comfortable home. The lighting was professional, suggesting a formal portrait session rather than a casual family snapshot. But as Sophia examined the photograph more closely, something in the child's expression made her pause. While the parent smiled warmly at the camera, radiating contentment and pride, there was something distinctly different in the infant's eyes. Even at such a young age, an unmistakable focus was etched on that tiny face. It wasn't the blank, innocent gaze typical of infants, but something that seemed almost aware, almost apprehensive. Sophia purchased the photograph for $25, unable to shake the feeling that those small eyes were trying to tell her something significant. Back at her antique shop in Lincoln Park, Sophia carefully removed the photograph from its frame for closer inspection. Years of experience had taught her that the most valuable information about old photographs often lay on the reverse side. Photographer's stamps, dates, names, or notes that provided crucial context. The back of the photograph revealed exactly what she'd hoped to find: an embossed stamp reading Henryk Kowalski Photographic Studio, Chicago, Illinois, along with a date written in elegant script, October 15, 1920. Below it, in a different hand, were 3 names: Robert, Catherine, and infant Thomas Williamson. Sophia's pulse quickened. She recognized the Kowalski name. Henryk Kowalski was one of Chicago's most prestigious portrait photographers in the 1920s, renowned for capturing the city's affluent elite. His work was highly prized by collectors, but more importantly, Kowalski was known for his meticulous record-keeping. If his studio archives still existed, they might hold valuable information about this specific session. She spent the next 2 hours poring over online databases and historical records. What she uncovered made the photograph even more intriguing. In 1920, Robert Williamson was a successful banker, part of Chicago's financial elite. Catherine Williamson, née Hartford, came from old money. Her family had built a fortune in railroad investments in the late 1800s. But the information about infant Thomas made Sophia pause. According to a Chicago Tribune obituary she located in newspaper archives, Thomas Williamson had passed away in November 1920, just 1 month after this photograph was taken. The cause of death was listed as sudden infant death syndrome, though medical understanding of SIDS in 1920 was rudimentary at best. Sophia looked at the photograph again, focusing on the child's eyes. Now, knowing Thomas would pass away weeks after this portrait, his expression seemed even more haunting. Was it possible that in some mysterious way, as sometimes happened with old photographs, the camera had captured something the human eye could not perceive? She reached for her phone to call Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a photography historian at Northwestern University who specialized in early 20th century portraiture. If anyone could help her understand the technical aspects of what she was seeing, it was Dr. Chen. "I have an unusual Kowalski portrait from 1920, she explained. "The child's expression is completely at odds with the parent's mood. It's as if the child sees something the adults don't." "Bring it in tomorrow morning," Dr. Chen responded, her voice immediately piqued with interest. Kowalski was known for capturing what other photographers missed. His portraits often revealed more than their subjects intended to show. Dr. Elizabeth Chen's office at Northwestern University was like a museum of photographic history. Vintage cameras from various eras lined shelves, and walls displayed examples of significant portraits spanning nearly 2 centuries. When Sophia arrived the next morning, Dr. Chen was already preparing her research equipment. "Henryk Kowalski," Dr. Chen mused, carefully placing the photograph under her specialized lighting. He was an interesting figure in Chicago's photography scene. Immigrated from Poland in 1910, built a reputation as a portraitist who seemed to capture people's inner essence, not just their facade. Through magnifying equipment, Dr. Chen examined every detail of the image. The technical quality is exceptional, even by Kowalski standards. Look at the depth of field, the way he captured the texture of the mother's dress, the intricate details of the baby's christening gown. Sophia watched as Dr. Chen focused intently on the child's face. "What's unusual about the infant's expression?" Several things. First, infants of this age, probably 4 to 6 months, typically have very limited facial expressions. They might reflexively smile, cry, or sleep, but this child appears to be focused on something specific, just outside the camera's range. Dr. Chen adjusted her equipment to get a clearer view. Look at the direction of his gaze. He's not looking at his parents, nor the photographer, but at something to the left of the camera setup. Perhaps a sound caught his attention? Possibly, but note his expression. It's not curiosity or startlement. If I had to describe it, I'd say it looks like weariness, even apprehension. Dr. Chen continued her examination, paying close attention to the lighting and shadows in the photograph. There's something else interesting here. Kowalski was known for his use of natural light, but in this portrait, there are multiple light sources. See these shadow patterns? They suggest a strong light source coming from the same direction the child is looking. What kind of light? Hard to say definitively, but it doesn't align with the soft, natural light Kowalski typically favored. It's as if something bright, perhaps a reflective light or an auxiliary lamp, was positioned in that area during the session. Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair, removing her spectacles with a gesture Sophia was coming to understand as significant. "Sophia, in my experience, when infants of this age display such a specific, focused expression, they're usually reacting to something immediate in their environment. The question is, what was in that room that we don't see in the photograph?" The child died a month later, sudden infant death syndrome, according to records. Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. That changes things. In 1920, SIDS was poorly understood, and many infant deaths that might have had other causes were attributed to it, combined with this child's expression. She paused, studying the photograph again. "I think we need to look more closely into this family." Sophia spent the next few days immersed in research at the Chicago History Museum. The Williamson family records painted a picture of typical wealthy Chicagoans of the 1920s. Charitable events, business dealings, mentions in society pages. But as she delved deeper into newspaper archives and public records, a more complex story began to emerge. Robert Williamson, she discovered, was not merely a banker. In 1919 and 1920, he was involved in several questionable financial dealings, including investments that were later investigated for fraud. Even more unsettling were the personal details she uncovered. Catherine Williamson had been hospitalized twice in 1920 for what medical records euphemistically called nervous exhaustion, a common diagnosis for women suffering from what would now be recognized as severe depression or anxiety. But a small item in the Chicago Tribune's Society section from November 1920 made Sophia's blood run cold. Following the tragic passing of their infant Thomas, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Williamson have announced their intention to depart for abroad indefinitely. Mrs. Williamson's physician has recommended a change of climate for her health. Sophia found more clues in Cook County property records. The Williamsons sold their North Lake Shore Drive home in December 1920, just 2 months after the portrait was taken, 1 month after infant Thomas's passing. The sale was handled quickly and quietly, and the home was sold for significantly less than its appraised value. At the Chicago Public Library's genealogy department, Sophia unearthed something even more disturbing. Thomas Williamson was not the couple's first child to pass away young. Catherine had given birth to a daughter, Mary, in 1918. According to her death certificate, Mary had passed away at 8 months old. The cause, too, was listed as sudden infant death syndrome. 2 children, both passing away before their first birthday. Both deaths attributed to the same mysterious cause that doctors in 1920 barely understood.
Sophia looked at the photograph again, focusing on infant Thomas's troubled expression. Had this child, somehow, sensed he was in danger? Her research led her to another crucial discovery. The Williamsons' North Lake Shore Drive home still stood. It had been converted into luxury condominiums in the 1980s, but the original structure of the building remained largely intact. The current owner of what had been the Williamsons' apartment was Dr. Amanda Foster, a pediatrician who had purchased the condo specifically because of its historical significance. Sophia called Dr. Foster, explaining her research into the photograph and the tragic history of the Williamson family. "I would like to see where that portrait was taken," Sophia said. "Sometimes seeing the space itself can offer clues to what was happening when a photo was made." "Of course," Dr. Foster replied. "Though I must warn you, there's something unusual about this apartment that might interest you, given what you're investigating." Dr. Amanda Foster's condominium occupied the entire 3rd floor of an elegant limestone building on North Lake Shore Drive. As she led Sophia through the renovated space, it was easy to imagine it as it had been in 1920. Sprawling rooms with high ceilings, large windows overlooking Lake Michigan, the kind of home that proclaimed its owner's success and social standing. "The living room, where your photograph was most likely taken, is here," Dr. Foster said, leading Sophia into a beautifully appointed room with original hardwood floors and restored crown molding. "I've tried to maintain its historical character while updating it for modern living." Sophia took out the photograph, comparing it to the current space. Despite the modern furniture and updated lighting, she recognized the basic structure of the room. The placement of the windows, the architectural details, even the general position where the Williamsons would have posed for their portrait. "When I bought this place 15 years ago, I researched its history," Dr. Foster continued. "The Williamson story was part of what drew me to it. As a pediatrician, in fact, I was intrigued by the mystery surrounding their children's deaths." "Mystery?" Dr. Foster gestured for Sophia to sit, her expression growing serious. "In my career, I've seen thousands of infant mortality cases, and while SIDS does occur, 2 instances in the same family within 2 years is highly unusual. Modern medicine would investigate far more thoroughly." She walked to a bookcase and pulled out a folder. "After I moved in, I found something left behind by the previous owners. Documents, photographs, even some personal effects that had been stored in the basement for decades." Sophia's heart pounded as Dr. Foster opened the folder. Inside were several items clearly from the Williamson era. utility bills, personal correspondence, and most notably, a letter from Catherine Williamson to her sister, dated November 20th, 1920, just 5 days after infant Thomas's passing. "May I?" Sophia asked, reaching for the letter. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written by someone under severe emotional distress. "Dearest Margaret, I cannot bear another day in this house. Thomas is gone, as is Mary, and I know deep in my heart that Robert... I cannot write the words, but you know what I suspect. The doctor says it was the same condition that took Mary, but I have seen Robert look at the children when he thinks no one is watching. There's a coldness in his eyes, something that frightens me. I found a bottle of laudanum hidden in his study, far more than any person would need for incidental pain. And on the night Thomas passed away, Robert was alone with him for over an hour before he called for help. When I touched my baby's skin, it was so cold, Margaret. So very cold." Sophia's hands trembled as she finished reading. She looked at Dr. Foster, who nodded grimly. "There's more," Dr. Foster said softly. "I think you should see the room that was the nursery." Dr. Foster led Sophia down the hallway to what had been converted into her home office. This was the nursery in 1920. When I was doing renovations, I discovered something behind the original wallpaper that the previous owners had never removed. She pointed to a section of the wall where the historical wallpaper had been carefully preserved under glass. "Look closely at the pattern." Sophia examined the delicate floral wallpaper, typical of the period, but as she looked closer, she noticed something unusual. In several places, the pattern was disrupted by small, dark smudges that looked almost like fingerprints. Dr. Foster confirmed. Tiny fingerprints pressed into the wallpaper at about the height where a crib would have stood. And they're not alone. She led Sophia to another section of preserved wallpaper where the smudges were different, larger, more irregular in shape. These tested positive for laudanum when I analyzed them out of curiosity. Sophia stared at the evidence, her mind reeling. "You think Robert Williamson was giving his children sedatives?" "I think Robert Williamson was systematically causing harm to his children with laudanum, and Catherine suspected it, but couldn't prove it. Laudanum was easily accessible in 1920, often used for everything from headaches to sleeplessness. A banker, like Robert, would have had easy access to it, and the indications of laudanum exposure in infants could easily be mistaken for natural causes." Dr. Foster walked to her desk and pulled out another document. "I also found this, an incomplete journal entry that Catherine apparently hid behind a loose floorboard. The journal entry, written in Catherine's increasingly desperate hand, painted a chilling picture. October 10th, 1920. Thomas has been so listless lately, sleeping far more than a healthy child should. When I mentioned it to Robert, he grew angry, saying I was an overprotective mother, just as I was with Mary. But I watch him when he thinks I am not looking. I have seen him give Thomas what he calls medicine, but the child always grows drowsy afterwards. I found the small brown bottle in Robert's study again, the same kind that was there when Mary was ill. He says it is for his back pain, but I have never seen him take anything. And there are markings on the bottles, small scratches that look as if someone has measured doses. I will watch more closely today. I'm going to protect Thomas, even if it means..." The entry broke off abruptly, the handwriting trailing away as if Catherine had been interrupted. Sophia looked at the photograph again, now understanding why there was such weariness in infant Thomas's eyes. He had been looking at his father during the portrait session. "That would be my assessment," Dr. Foster agreed. "Infants of that age are incredibly perceptive to danger. If Robert Williamson was systematically causing harm to Thomas, the child would have learned to associate his father's presence with feeling unwell, with distress.
That expression in the photograph is not accidental. It's an infant's instinctive recognition of a threat. Armed with this new understanding, Sophia returned to her research with renewed vigor. She needed to find Henryk Kowalski's studio records, hoping they might contain additional insights into the portrait session that could confirm their suspicions. After several phone calls and emails, she discovered that Kowalski's archives had been donated to the Columbia College Chicago Photo Archive after his passing in 1965. The archivist, Dr. Marcus Webb, agreed to meet with Sophia to examine any records pertaining to the Williamson session. Kowalski was incredibly meticulous in his record-keeping, Dr. Webb explained as they descended into the climate-controlled basement where the archives were stored. He documented not only the technical aspects of each shoot, but often included personal observations about his subjects. They located the 1920 ledger, and Dr. Webb carefully opened to the October entries. There, in Kowalski's precise handwriting, was the entry for October 15, 1920. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Williamson with infant Thomas. Commissioned formal family portrait for holiday cards. Payment $50 in advance. Technical notes. Natural light from east-facing windows, supplemented with reflector. Mrs. Williamson very nervous throughout session. Frequently checked on child. Mr. Williamson impatient, eager to conclude session quickly. Personal observations. Unusual family dynamic. Child appeared distressed whenever father approached. Mrs. W. very protective of child, did not allow husband to hold child for posing. Infant appeared healthy, but seemed unusually alert, startled, cautious for his age. Recommended rescheduling when child more settled, but Mr. W. insisted on proceeding. Concluding note. During final frames, child became agitated as father approached for group pose. Captured expression shows distinct apprehension in infant. Mrs. W. requested certain poses not be included in the final selection. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. Even the photographer had noticed the strange family dynamic and infant Thomas's apprehension towards his father. But there was something more. Dr. Webb located a folder of correspondence related to the Williamson session. Inside was a letter from Catherine Williamson to Kowalski, dated November 25, 1920, 10 days after Thomas's passing. Dear Mr. Kowalski, I am writing to request all photographs and negatives from our October session. My husband has asked me to retrieve them in light of our son's recent passing. However, I must ask you a personal favor. If you observed anything unusual during our session, anything that pertained to my family's well-being, please document it and keep those records secure. I fear there may come a time when such observations will be important. I am enclosing payment for an additional set of prints to be kept in your personal files. Please do not mention this to my husband. Sincerely, Mrs. Catherine Williamson. P.S. My child's eyes in that last photograph. You captured something important. Please preserve it. Sophia realized that what she had uncovered was potential evidence of a century-old homicides. Despite the passage of time, she felt a moral obligation to properly document her findings. She contacted Detective Maria Santos of the Chicago Police Department's Cold Case Unit, explaining that she had uncovered evidence related to suspicious infant deaths from 1920. Detective Santos, a seasoned investigator with 15 years on the force, was intrigued enough to meet with Sophia at the antique shop. As Sophia laid out all the evidence, the photograph, Catherine's letters, Dr. Foster's discoveries, and Kowalski's records, Detective Santos listened with growing interest. Obviously, we can't open a 1920 case, but from an investigative standpoint, this is fascinating. The pattern you've identified aligns with what we now know about family harm doers, individuals who systematically cause the passing of family members, often for financial reasons. She studied the photograph carefully. Cases of infant fatalities from that era were rarely thoroughly investigated, especially when the perpetrator was a wealthy, respected member of the community, and laudanum poisoning would have been nearly impossible to detect with 1920s medical knowledge. Detective Santos pulled out her laptop and began searching modern databases. Let me see what I can find about Robert Williamson's later life. After a few minutes of searching, she located records that made the case even more compelling. Robert Williamson remarried in 1925 to a wealthy widow named Helen Morrison. She had 2 young children from a previous marriage, a son and a daughter. Sophia's heart sank, anticipating what would come next. Both children passed away within 2 years of the marriage. The son in 1926 at age 6, the cause listed as pneumonia. The daughter in 1927 at age 4 from what was called a wasting illness. Helen Morrison Williamson herself passed away in 1928, ostensibly from grief and declining health. "He did it again," Sophia whispered. "It certainly appears so." By 1930, Robert Williamson had inherited a substantial fortune from his second wife and relocated to California, where he lived in affluence until his passing in 1954. Never remarried, no more children. Detective Santos closed her laptop. "What you've uncovered here is evidence of a serial killer who used his social standing and the medical limitations of his era to cause the passing of multiple family members, likely for financial gain. Robert Williamson eliminated his own children and stepchildren and likely contributed to the passing of his wives through psychological distress." She looked at the photograph again, focusing on infant Thomas's apprehensive expression. This child knew he was in danger. Somehow, that camera captured his recognition of a threat that the adults around him either couldn't see or chose to ignore.